crowd goes wild.
That I wish that was like if you just walk in a room that happens. When I was a kid, I always wanted like the song "Dazed and Confused" to just. I like the beginning of that song so much. I always wanted like anytime I walk in a room to just have the start of that song just play.
Well, I was a captain on the wrestling team back in middle school, and one of our jobs was to find out, to find a song that we could come out to. And so I think I just got the AC/DC. It was like a little box set type thing.
Yeah, we both had that. Like it was maybe a live double disc.
Yeah, it came with like a
live or something like that.
AC/DC dollar or something.
Oh yeah, the Angus dollar.
Yeah, and I think it was TNT.
Mm-hmm.
It was
TNT.
Yeah, it was
Dynamite.
It was either TNT or it was like Thunderstruck or something like that. But so our wrestling team was kind of a big deal because it was a bunch of us tried out for the basketball team, and we were pretty good.
Shoot to thrill,
but we didn't make the team for whatever reason. Like
because you played to kill.
Well, it was a lot of people sitting around after, like they, called the names out for the team.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of like kids sitting around, like it was kind of like the first time you realized, oh, this guy that sucks. You can see him talk. His dad's talking to the coach afterwards, and there was like a bunch of guys, over talking to the coach, and you're going, oh, they're buddies, and we just kicked their asses, but that didn't stop them from picking these guys for the team. And there was a guy that was new to our school, very athletic, and he was like, screw this, let's join the wrestling team. So the wrestling team, I remember the group of us going to the wrestling practice, and the 5 kids that were in the class or 10 kids that were in the class look up, and there's now 30 of us.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably the biggest wrestling team that the school has ever seen. And because after like a week, we kept recruiting people. Like, oh, you want to come wrestle? I think there was like 9 people in my weight class. But anyways, we got these hoodies. Almost everybody on the team shaved their head. And so we would put the hoodies on and would come out. And I just remember coming out to TNT or something like that. But it was a live version, so the crowd was like, ah. And I remember like running around the circle, and we had this, kind of like warm-up routine to do. But at some point, all the captains were like, just keep you can take the hoodie off if you want. But the captains were going to keep their hoodies on until it was done. But it felt like the crowd felt so freaking huge because they're blasting it over the loud system.
And it's the crowd from the AC/DC
right
live. It's like you're playing to the laugh track almost. You're going out, and there's probably some people that are clapping or whatever.
Yeah.
But you hear the audio, and it sounds like, well, we got 10,000, 50,000 screaming fans.
I figured I'd pull off the hoodie, and the place was going to be packed. And I remember pulling off the hoodie, and it was just crickets. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is the wrestling team. Nobody cares. So, yeah, but I wish I could remember if it was TNT or I might have been Thunderstruck, because Thunderstruck has the better intro.
The longer intro. Yeah.
Yeah, the cool guitar tapping.
So this guy, Matt Lakin, for the Knoxville News Sentinel, there is a fascinating and this is just a really well done piece of work here. If you go to knoxnews.com, guessing that's the Knoxville News website, but knoxnews.com, they have a Missing in the Smokies. Dennis Martin's disappearance still haunts Park 50 years later. On Friday, June 14, marks 50 years since a grinning Dennis Martin darted out of his family's sight during a weekend camping trip. He never came home. So that's crazy. I mean, one that it's been 50 years. Two, I mean, if this boy would have somehow survived, or if in some weird way he is still alive, he'd be 56 years old. Well, right. Actually, if you remember when we covered it, so we covered it last year, and that would have been September 2018. Dennis Martin, it's episode 238 for anybody that wants to look up in the archives, the garage chives. If you remember correctly, he was actually just days away from his 7th birthday. So I'm guessing he would be technically 57 years old.
Yeah.
And this I tell you what, out of all the cases that we've covered, this one is one that just, I mean, it's such a mystery. It truly is, and it almost doesn't seem real for a couple of reasons. One, it was so long ago, but two, just the disappearance and then absolutely no trace of the boy afterward just feels like something out of a movie. And I do know, I think it was in the Missing 411 documentary. It's been years since I've watched that. You've seen that Missing 411.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that documentary? Because I have some good thoughts and some bad thoughts.
I think it's worth watching.
Oh, I agree there.
That's where I think people need to start, right?
Yeah.
When you're given a recommendation, start with, is it worth watching?
Oh, it not only was it worth watching, it was entertaining and fascinating because there is so many mysteries involved. And most of the, if I'm remembering correctly, most of the documentary focuses on children who end up going missing in these huge state parks.
Yeah, and what's cool about this article on the Knox News is you get to see 20, I believe it's 20.
There's a lot of pictures.
And so it's really interesting to see the search, how many people were searching.
Mm-hmm. Well, they had like 240 people up there by day 2, the day after.
Yeah.
So he went missing in the, let's say, afternoon, early evening, and they did their best to search that night. His grandfather even hiking like miles to get to where the park rangers were stationed. And then the park rangers and a bunch of people got involved in the search that night. But remember, there was a crazy storm that came in that night. And we're talking about, like, this wasn't just a rain. This was a crazy thunderstorm, high winds, flash flooding. So the article is so well done. I don't know how many pages it is. It's pretty lengthy. And what's really cool, like you said, there's a lot of pictures that I've never seen before.
Yeah, there's a couple of the pictures that seem like it's like Vietnam.
Some of the pictures look movie-esque.
Yeah.
Right? And so they are, we won't go through the whole thing because it's a lengthy article, and that's up to anybody if they want to venture over to knoxnews.com and check it out. But really, they cite a few different things depending on who you're talking to. This I found to be interesting was that they mentioned bears, and I know that we probably mentioned bears when we discussed this, but they were talking about how unusually brazen the bears were that season, and it had to do with a drought from the year before and a lack of acorns and other food that they would typically just find lying around in their travels. And so they were saying that the bears were a little more aggressive and also venturing into areas that they may not have in the past because of this.
Well, we covered the Dior coons. Is that how you say it?
Mm-hmm. Dior coons.
But cases are very similar, but also very different, because I believe in the Dennis Martin case, there was actually some evidence left behind. And then the Dior coons, it's like we don't even have evidence that he was there. Yeah,
and you have the sheriff's statement in Dior Coons' case of if anybody knows a family out there that has a son or a little boy now and didn't have one before, that's
Right.
who we need to talk to, because they kind of very suspicious that maybe the mother or mother and father gave Dior away. And I know these child cases are very sad to, one, they're sad for us to cover, and two, they're sad to listen to. I get it. But Dior's case is very weird in the way that I actually hope and pray that they gave him away, but gave him away to somebody that loves him and is treating him as they would raise their own son.
Yeah.
And I think
in
that,
a weird way, it's like a different version of Gone Baby Gone.
yeah, and I think with Dior's case, that could be a very, could be a possibility with high probability percentage, I think, in that one. And Dennis Martin's case, to me, completely different in the sense that it seemed like the boy going missing, Dennis, or Denny, as his family called him going missing, like, just seemed to control his father's life and his grandfather's lives for the rest of their days. It was something that haunted them, that they never really quit looking for this little boy. And I said that the article cites the aggressiveness of the bears, but then you have park rangers who really kind of hone in on the storm that took place that night, saying that it would have been difficult for an adult to survive out there in those circumstances. We're talking about an individual with no hat, no jacket, nothing like that. I mean, he literally disappeared with the clothes on his back and his shoes on his feet. And they were saying that for an adult to survive out there just that one night, the temperature got so cold and it was so miserable out there, they don't think that a child would have lived much longer than, maybe even into the early morning hours.
Yeah, it's difficult for me too, because the little metro parks that we have around here, you can walk. They have these different paths or whatever, but you can walk like the big path where you basically go through the whole park, and it'll take you an hour or maybe more. And those feel somewhat big while you're there, but this park is, the entrance is the size of my park.
Right.
This is
It's a Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
Yeah, it's well, and what's interesting too is like the parks I'm going to, like I said, they might have a path or a walkway or a hiking trail or something around the whole perimeter of the park. But they have walking trails and some, places to, like, shelter houses and stuff like that. But then it just goes into the wild.
Mm-hmm.
These little parks back up into the wild, and those don't have paths and those don't have shelters. It's just, hundreds and hundreds of acres of wild.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so we have, they say, nearly 1,500 searchers, from park rangers and FBI agents to backcountry hunters and Green Beret, combed a stretch of nearly 60 square miles, 60 square miles, and still walked away empty-handed, really with no trace of the little boy. The thing here, too, I like, is the Green Berets are brought in on this. Now, that group, they were saying, if we searched an area, if we didn't find him, he's not there. So basically they're saying whatever areas we searched, you can just put a big fat X on those, because if he was in any of the areas we searched, we would have found him. Now,
Yeah.
they didn't specifically cover the whole 60 square miles themselves, but then you have park rangers. What really went on within this missing persons case was learning future tactics and strategies for conducting a search for an individual in an area this large. They really learned through trial and error, through the real life exercise of trying to find this boy, what to do and what not to do in the future. And unfortunately, we don't know what happened to Denny Martin, but the fortunate thing that came from that is there's actually been lives saved and people found because of techniques and strategies that were created because of this real life emergency.
Yeah, I can't remember what case it was off the top of my head, but when they were searching for somebody, they had ways of marking trees to block off different areas to let people know, hey, we've already searched here. Mm-hmm. I can't remember what case that was.
Well, and you'll remember in Dennis Martin's case, they were saying we had so many people up here searching, and there was no way to really organize the thing. So sometimes they were searching an area 2 or 3 times,
right,
when it might not have been necessary. But I guess at the end of the day, you go, well, I'd rather double check a spot than to worry about how I'm going to spend days or weeks trying to organize this search. The Rangers do point out that nowadays they very likely, while they were excited and grateful that so many people turned out to help in the search and turned out so quickly, but what they say nowadays is we wouldn't bring all those people in or all those vehicles into the area so quickly because you have trained park rangers who know how to track people in the woods, and the methods that they use to track somebody, that stuff is easily destroyed when you bring in all these volunteers and vehicles that are driving over top of possible prints or trampling over trails and through the woods. So they think that a lot of that stuff was probably lost. If there would have been any trace, that it was lost because bringing in all these searchers, that's great, but the people have to know what to look for. And an untrained, an unskilled tracker does not. And it's just like contaminating a crime scene. If in the efforts to save lives with ambulance, EMT, fire, police, their number one goal was always to save life, to protect life. And sometimes crime scenes become contaminated by the rescue efforts of the rescuers. So, and that's probably may have been what happened here in Dennis's case, that if there was some kind of trace, some kind of way or evidence to track the boy, it might have been lost, 1, due to the storm, and 2, to all the people that came into the area. Now, in the article, they do cite what we cited when we covered the case, was that his father, Dennis's father, believes that the boy may have been kidnapped. The issue with that is it's such a short window of time that he's unaccounted for, unless you factor in that maybe he wandered away and he kept getting further and further from the family. But Martin's father says within 5 minutes they were looking for the boy. Now, park rangers state that even if they were walking and calling out to him, or Dennis was calling out to them, that the way that the landscape is and the winds out there, even before the storm, the rangers say, I doubt they could hear each other. And, that makes it even much more difficult. And then we do have that statement, the weird statement of the guy. Remember there was a guy that said that he and his son or daughter, I can't remember which, but 2 people were traveling in an area, walking trails. They were out looking, they were hoping to see a bear.
Yeah, this was like a month after, though.
Bring your camp. No, well, they reported a month after.
Oh, okay.
So I think they reported a month after, but it wasn't a month after that this supposed sighting happened, where this gentleman says that he saw a man, but he couldn't make out much of the man's features or give a good description of the man, because he said that the man had his back turned to him most of the time and was walking. And the eyewitness believes that the man was doing his best to not be seen. And when the man and his child came out of the woods, he says there was a vehicle up near our vehicle when we went into the woods. Then I see this guy who looks to me like he's moving in a way that he doesn't want to be seen. And the eyewitness says, I don't think this guy knows that I saw him. But he says, we come out of the woods and that car's gone. I don't know if it belonged to the man that I saw, but it's kind of crazy that it was once there and now is not. And he just described that as like a late model Chevy, a late model white Chevrolet vehicle.
So
But
you're right. The authorities didn't hear about this for about a month, and this happened. And then after it happened, he learned about the Martin disappearance that a day later, basically,
because they didn't their trip end and they went home to wherever they were from, and then he gets home and he's like, and learns of this boy going missing, and then he's like, wait a second, I might have seen something of importance here.
Yeah, but then I think he set on it. I mean, this is also just a different time period too, and the people's characters are different, right? And their demeanor is different, so a little more reserved, I would assume, and I think it took him a minute to contact authorities about it.
Mm-hmm.
And rightfully so, because you don't know if it had anything to do with it or not.
Well, and you wonder too. You probably just dismiss it, and then it festers. The thought of it possibly being connected festers to the point where you're like, all right, I have to shit or get off the pot here. I need to just call this thing in and be done with it.
Right.
And
when in doubt, let the authorities check it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
That could be that's a new shirt. When in doubt, let the authorities check it out.
Well, and I believe that what the park rangers came up with in response to that possible eyewitness, according to his statement anyway, is that they say it's about 9 miles from where Dennis was last seen.
Yeah.
And where this man says he saw a man in the woods. The problem with that then becomes the time frame that this eyewitness gives is only like an hour and a half to 2 hours after the boy was last seen.
Right. I don't have a problem with that because we know that this man had a vehicle. So is it possible that he
moved him and then
and took him to another part of the woods, was going to do something to the boy, and then there was people around, and he was like, well, this ain't going to work. Now I got to move him again.
Yeah. I think they're just pointing out if you were to believe that the boy made his way that distance and that time, they think it to be highly
right.
Very, very unlikely.
And that's a tough thing though too. It's like,
but then again, what's the math on not finding any trace of this boy at all? 60 square miles. It's just, it's really, I swear, I think it's one of the bigger mysteries that we've covered.
But I think a bear could, move a kid pretty easily.
I agree. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean there wouldn't be some trace of evidence, but I don't know. I think, I follow this guy, like a YouTube vlogger, and he lives in Montana, and he's constantly showing like bears on their property, and they're not that afraid of the humans. It's something that they have to watch out for, to the point where I believe he got his wife, like, they call them bear dogs, that they'll go like hiking with humans, and they're just kind of loud enough and scary enough to scare the bears away. But if the bears aren't scared away, well, then you got a dead human and dead dogs.
Yeah, and I think we did a very good job covering the Dennis Martin disappearance, but this article's fantastic, and they have
it's worth checking out just for the pictures.
Toward the end, they have a dig deeper section where I'm guessing you can click on Missing in the Smokies, Dennis Martin's disappearance still haunts Park 50 years later. Then they have a timeline for the case.
It's a bunch more articles that were written about this case.
Yeah, and then Mysteries of the Smokies, 5 missing people never found. And then, of course, lessons learned in Dennis Martin Disappearance still saves lives in the Smokies and beyond.
Yeah, it's crazy. His birthday would have been June 20th.